Thanks for having me here. So I was kind of asked to fill in last minute for a speaker who kind of got sick, and so I needed to present something sort of near and dear to my heart, something that I could do quickly without too much preparation. So I give you a presentation. The organizers didn't ask exactly what I was going to present on, so woodworking basics. Deploying dovetails to production, specifically handmade ones. Very difficult. I'm just kidding. JavaScript. Of course, right? You knew that. So JavaScript, what's now, what's coming now, and what's coming next. I'll go over a bit of history of TC39, but the big thing that I want you to take away from this is some excitement about where JavaScript, the language, is going. And I have a lot of links in here for where you can get involved with the community and even help design the language and provide feedback and all that kind of stuff. So really be watching for things that you are interested by, and definitely feel free to participate. So I get asked a lot, what actually is TC39? Well, it's kind of obvious. It's the 39th Technical Committee in ECMA. But that's kind of a tautological definition. But it's really just people. It's just a bunch of people in a room hashing things out. There's a bunch of member organizations. Many of them have employees here today. There's also academia. There's a bunch of people that are working on sort of the more theoretical side of language, like building reference implementations that are provably correct and that kind of thing. And there's also community projects and invited experts and other individuals that contribute a lot to what TC39 is. So with that out of the way, I'm not going to use the clicker. Here's a 3,048 meter view of TC39's work. That's 10,000 feet for those of you who don't speak imperial units. There's ECMA 262. That's the ECMAScript standard. There's also ECMA 402, which is the separate internationalization standard. This is the Intel object that you might be using if you're localizing your applications. And there's also ECMA 404, spec not found. That's the JSON format. That's also a separate spec. TC39 owns all of this work. So in order for you to appreciate just how awesome our process and stuff is today, I really have to tell you a little bit of history. So like Ashley mentioned, JavaScript was actually born in 10 days. Under like severe management pressure, Brendan Eich did an amazing thing, and JavaScript was born. Of course, 1.0 was missing a bunch of stuff, like it didn't even have prototypical inheritance at the time. But regardless, it was born. And then a few years later, in June of '97, we got edition 1. And then we had this kind of really nice, I say we, but I actually was not. I was still in high school at this time, I guess. But edition 2 and edition 3 followed very rapidly. So in 1999, the third edition of ECMAScript came out. That's like roughly the IE6 era. To give you an idea of what that was. So just what we would consider today really basic JavaScript. Some of us target this version of the language in our transpilers, and that code is really bad. But regardless, after 99, we sort of entered this huge span of time where nothing happened. The committee was working on this ECMAScript 4 thing, and there was a bunch of different ideas, and like there was proposals for even types, like static types were in there. For a while, it looked like ActionScript was going to actually become the standard ECMAScript, but ultimately it didn't work out. And so after a decade of work, in December of '09, we got ES5. And that really didn't add much. That added strict mode, that added getters and setters, JSON, and some of the object reflection capabilities. So it introduced the notion of a property descriptor and that kind of thing. So it took 10 years for that, kind of frustrating. And then it was another 6 years before we got the next version of the spec. ES5, or ES6, or otherwise known as ES2015, Yes, there's an off by 1 error there, and I'm really sorry about that. But this finally, we got a big update to the language. The reason this update was so big is because it was actually the culmination of all of that work during the ES4 period that never came to fruition. A bunch of that stuff was brought back, and actually we got consensus to get that into the language. So ES6 added promises, classes, iterators and generators and their associated protocols, the typed arrays, maps and sets. It added new syntax for functions, the arrow functions, proxies, which are really cool, and a bunch of other really handy syntax sugar and capabilities and library enhancements and that kind of thing. So 15 years roughly, we finally got a major update to the language. Now, ES2016 was released very rapidly after that. And that's because at the time, after ES6 or ES2015 came out, we realized that the current process just wasn't going to scale. TC39 was growing very large. They had a lot of stakeholders. And we also really wanted to sort of democratize the spec, to make it open to everyone to read and contribute. And so part of that was moving away from this Word document that we'd been keeping the spec in since 1.0. It's actually really interesting to note that it was the same Word document from '97. So that's really an impressive, I think, testament to software compatibility. But that's about the only good thing about it. Now the spec is in HTML. It's an HTML and Markdown sort of dialect. It's plain text. You can read it and write it in pretty much any editor. But this release is tiny. We only had a year to work on it, and we also didn't have much stuff in the pipeline. So this added the exponentiation operator, which is ** to do math.pow, and array.prototype.includes. Not very impressive. That release was all about the new process. By the next year, for ES2017, the pipeline was starting to fill up. We finally got async functions in, and also shared memory and atomics, which finally enabled truly performant cross-thread applications to be written on the web platform, and object.values and entries. So again, a fairly small release. The pipeline is still filling up. I would say now we have a pretty full pipeline. There's a bunch of proposals that are in the pipeline, and so now the question is, what's next? Now what? Well, what do you think? It's kind of up to you to help us figure that out. Do you want to help? I hope so. There's a bunch of ways to participate in ECMAScript. Of course, you know, we're all on Twitter, and we're all trying to be keeping in touch with the developer community. But these are, I think, the primary ways to get involved. So GitHub, this GitHub site, literally everything that TC39 does as far as standards work occurs on GitHub. So you can pretty much get a complete picture of where TC39 is on any feature just by going to this GitHub site and finding the proposal that you're interested in. There's also a mailing list. If you're not into like actually subscribing to mailing lists, which I think is the case for most of us, there's a website for it. And there's also an IRC channel. I want to point out that we're kind of in the early days of figuring out how to integrate ourselves with the community. So if we're missing you where you are, and you think we need to do a better job in reaching your community and understanding your needs, suggest something. We'll definitely strongly consider any improvements here. So we have a code of conduct. Just be nice. And another interesting project that I really want to call out is Test262. This is the project that got me into ECMAScript. It was like 6 years ago. There's this Test262 thing. I was on the test team at Microsoft working on this new JavaScript engine called Chakra. And I thought this was a really cool thing. It's like, hey, a test suite owned by a standards committee that tells implementers how good their implementation is effectively, like how well it conforms to the spec. So this is actually used by all JavaScript engines. Right now it has over 50,000 tests, and it's growing every day. And this is kind of a good way, I think, to sort of train yourself on some of the skills that are required to work with TC39 on stuff. So you can't write tests unless you can do the spec reading and a bunch of other interesting stuff. So Test 262 is a great way to get involved. This is the big guy, ECMA 262. This is the ECMAScript spec. So if you have bugs that you're reading the document and you find something that seems off to you, you can file bugs there. If you find typos and other things, you can file bugs or just send a pull request. I vastly prefer that. It's one button press. It's real nice. You can also discuss changes, but this repo is only for changes that aren't proposals. So this is like more scope changes to ECMA 262. Proposals that are in the pipeline, where this is probably the stuff that you're mostly interested in, you can find that here at this link, github.com/tc39/proposals. This is our pipeline. This has every proposal that TC39 is aware of, from the low stage 0 proposals all the way up to the completed stage 5 proposals. In each of these proposals, you'll find spec text, you'll find issues where you can use, where you will find discussions about the feature, people sharing their concerns and working through design issues and that kind of stuff. And there will also be FAQs and use cases and a lot of other design documents and things. Early proposals won't have much of that, but you'll find that more in the later proposals. So it's a great resource to read through it and sort of learn how this feature is supposed to work and what its use cases and intentions are. Briefly, I have to mention the staging process, since you'll immediately get exposed to this. Stage 0, just basically any proposal that a TC39 delegate dreams up, that's a valid stage 0 proposal. The only requirement is there has to be a delegate champion. Stage 1 is TC39 saying, yep, seems like a problem. Go ahead and spend some time figuring it out. At stage 2 is when you start to get some initial spec text. And here, TC39 is saying, yes, we think that this proposal, or something like it, will likely be included in a future edition of the standard. So you notice up until this point, the proposals are really loose. There's a lot of room for change. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to use these stage 0, 1, and 2 proposals in tools like Babel. Stage 3 is where things start to really get solid. There's complete spec text, and the committee is essentially saying, OK, we think this spec text is good. Now we need to know if you can actually implement it. So implementers go out, do your work, give us feedback, and we'll take that into consideration. And assuming everything is good, then we get to stage 4, which is, at that point, it's my job to move that proposal into the main spec text, and then it's basically on the train and will be released in the next version that comes out a year later. So I want to talk about some of these proposals, because there's a lot of really exciting work happening, and I think there's a lot of great opportunities for you folks to get involved. Just to give you an idea of the scope of the number of proposals that we have, this is actually an old list. I haven't updated this in a while. There are a lot of proposals. This doesn't even include the stage 0 proposals, of which there are a bunch more. So if you're into JavaScript, there's definitely something here that you'll be interested in. A lot of this stuff has been covered in the in-depth track and some of the other talks, but I just want to cover it briefly. Classes are getting a new version. The version of classes that were in ES6 were something that we called maximally minimal. Maximally minimal just means the most useful thing that we can do and also get consensus on that thing. So when you're trying to get a bunch of people to agree on something, the less you're trying to agree on, the easier the process is going to be. And so classes, we always knew that, well, we're going to come back and add a bunch of features to classes that people have been asking for, and that's what this is all about. So decorators, for people that are familiar with decorators in other languages, these work pretty much the same in terms of what they can do. It's a little bit more JavaScript-y, but Still, it's sort of the same deal of declaratively altering the shapes and behaviors of objects and classes. Public field declarations, probably most people in this room are using public field declarations already in tools like Babel, and TypeScript. They've been supported in those tools for quite some time. Really, really handy. And also private field declarations and methods are coming. So finally, we can have private in JavaScript. And this is actually true private. There's no reflection. It's not like symbols where you can use get own symbols, or I forgot the name of that API. But you can't, unless you're inside of the class, you have no idea that these private slots even exist, let alone be able to access them. So that's something that library authors and framework authors have really been asking to, because you folks are really bad at avoiding underscore properties. Which I understand. You just got to get your work done. So I love regex. I have a lot of fun doing regex. Based on some of the previous times I've talked about this, there's a number of you who don't write regex. A lot of people end up being like sort of the regex guru on their team. But regardless, hopefully this isn't too hard to read. So look behinds are a feature that have been in pretty much every JavaScript, or not JavaScript, pretty much every regex engine, but JavaScript regexes for some reason only had look ahead. I heard an interesting technique actually for solving that problem if you reverse the string and use a look ahead. I actually haven't seen that one yet, but it's kind of awesome. But it'd be nice not to have to do that. There's also going to be Unicode property escapes. This is a way to match characters based on how Unicode classifies them. So you can match, for example, white space to match the however many hundred white space characters exist in Unicode, or numbers. There's not just 10 numbers. There are many, many, many numbers. Bold ones, ones in Gothic, outline ones. So you can actually write regex to match those. Named capture groups is another feature that most other regex engines have. This lets you name a capture group, and then when you actually do the match, you have a .groups object, and you can just reference these capture groups by name. One of the aspects about this that I really like is that it helps you actually document what that capture group is. I actually kind of see this as half a capability that's kind of nice, and half giving you the capability to actually document your regex in a way that makes it a little bit more understandable. And then there's the .all flag. How many people know that dot doesn't match everything in JavaScript? If you try to do a dot, it doesn't. It doesn't match line breaks, even with the multi-line mode. It matches everything but. So there's cool tricks, like square bracket, caret, close square bracket, or a character class with \D, \D, or something like that. Those all are bad. The S flag, I think, is going to be something that you're going to want to set on pretty much every regex that you use in the future, along with the Unicode flag, which was added recently. Of course, nothing is nicer than syntax sugar. We all love it. It doesn't add any new capabilities to the language, but it does let us express our intent in a lot more clear way, and just makes programming more fun, I think. Rest and spread for properties is something, again, that is a heavily used pattern in the React community. That's coming. Also, optional catch parameter. Very simple proposal. It just lets you leave off the binding for the error. I think this proposal has the highest ratio of concerns to spec text of any proposal, but I personally hope to see it. Numeric separators are coming. This is going to be especially important with the big integers that are coming, but it'll be nice for JavaScript, just regular floats as well. And then there's also optional chaining. This is another pretty popular extension in the Babel world. It basically lets you dot off of an object and not care if that object is actually there or not. You'll just get undefined or something. So that's a pretty handy feature for a pattern that we do a lot. Big integers are coming. Finally, a number type other than floats. So big integers, arbitrary size. You can store numbers up to the how much RAM you have on your machine. So you can it'll be slow, but you can have a really big number. So there's no sort of weird floating point behavior with these things. I once implemented an accounting system using a floating point number of dollars, and the accountants were very upset with me because pennies would go missing just like into the ether, and like I had no idea what was going on. If I had big integers, that might have not been a problem, because you don't get this loss of precision. It's just integer arithmetic, and you avoid a lot of the troubles of floating points. So there's not a lot of operator overloading here. They're kind of throwy in that a lot of the normal uses you might think of will end up throwing. Like you can't add a big integer and a float because we don't really know what that means. So just keep that in mind, but that's something that we can work on improving in the future. Here's another proposal that I'm really excited about, the pipeline operator. This lets you do functional chaining. It's basically a way to do nested functions, but stack them one after the other after the other. It's just basically nested functions. So you can think of it like passing the left-hand side as an argument to the right-hand side. So this is an early proposal, so this is basically just my thinking about it. Just keep that in mind. But you can pass in the left-hand side as the first parameter, or potentially there's a question mark placeholder, which would let you use like Ramda.js, which takes its data as the last parameter. And I think that's a kind of nice syntax to sort of customize where you're going to pass the left-hand side's value into. It has a really nice benefit that it works out of the box with a lot of libraries in the ecosystem. And there's more coming every day that make this a really great language feature to have. So there's, like you saw that list, there's a ton more. Here's a couple that I'm excited about. Do expressions, let you put statements in expression forms. When you need it, you really need it. Also, dates. Raise your hand if you really like JavaScript dates. There are no hands. There are no hands. I have never once seen a hand actually go up to that question. Maggie Pint, she works on the Moment.js team. She is working with TC39 to develop a new date that actually works. Yes. And it's going to be amazing, actually. I cannot wait for this. Throw expressions are coming, so you can throw in your parameter initializers. Maybe I want return break and continue expressions as well. I don't know. What do you think? Also, flat map and flatten are a couple proposals that I'm working on that I personally use all the time. And man, there are just a ton more proposals. So definitely go check it out and see where you can get involved. So here's a few links, TC39 GitHub page and the proposals. You can follow the development of ECMAScript itself if you're not interested in these proposals. You just want to see like what's in the spec right now. So I hope to see you out there. And thank you.